feel free to talk amongst yourself while people
Okay.
come in.
No. As people wander in. It's always interesting, virtual space. How much do we try and pretend like it's just like real space? Like the people are wandering in and sitting down.
I don't know. It's a small world sometimes. I think we should have the 6 degrees of separation science fiction category and figure out who would be the top. Maybe Greg Bear would be #1 these days.
Oh, he knows everybody.
You can't count the dead guys because otherwise that'd be David Hartwell, I figure. Maybe Isaac.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know.
All right, Dwayne, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay. Well, welcome, folks. I'm Dwayne, science fiction buyer for the University Bookstore. We are having our Zoom talk with tonight's featured author, Cat Rambo. Cat, his book just came on sale today with the very generic title of You Sexy Thing, which is not your typical science fiction title, but if you read the book, it makes perfect sense. I can sit here and list all of Cat's awards and story stuff, but that would take up the whole hour, so we're not going to do that. She's written the Tibet books, and in her spare time, she, casually was president of SIFWA, and did that in her spare time too. The main shipment of her book just came in, so if you haven't got a copy yet, this would be the perfect time to go onto our website and order copies and make notes if you want them personalized, because she's going to come in a few days and take care of that for us. I think I forgot to say, Cat, before we ask you to read a little chunk of the book.
I don't think so.
I mean, I could mention what the book's about, but I figure that's usually what you enjoy to do, so maybe we'll let you take it away.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay.
I'm going to start at the very beginning of the book and go for about 20 minutes. I think that'll take us through the first chapter, and we'll see how that goes. So this is You Sexy Thing, but I wanted to say thank you all for being here. It's so exciting. This is the book birthday of not my first novel, but kind of the first big major publisher one. And so I'm just super excited. I've been sort of wandering around in a daze all day long. So here we go. This is You Sexy Thing. The entrance buzzer chimed. Someone outside in the public hallway of the space station was paging for admittance. Nico Larson, aka Captain Nicolette Larson, formerly one of the finest military geniuses the holy hive mind had ever threatened to absorb, now retired, looked around. She thought, what now? She checked the view screen. A delivery bot stood outside, flanked by a large crate, about 2 meters long, a ½ meter wide, and 1 meter tall. Its metal carapace was brown and yellow, regular station delivery colors. It stood patiently, ignoring the impatient stares of passersby trying to get around the large crate in the 5 meter wide hallway. She didn't remember any deliveries due today, but pushed the button nonetheless. With a velvety whoosh, the door slid open. You should take that into the kitchen through the back access hall, she said. There's too much furniture in here. Don't bring it in this way. Despite her words, the bot was already trundling forward, past her and the entrance lectern, trailed by the crate. It said, with a burst of speaker static resembling an officious chirp, the access hallway leads to the kitchens of the Last Chance restaurant. This delivery tag specifies Last Chance, and the default is main entrance. Then don't go with the default. Use the back entrance. My delivery has been executed. The bot detached itself from the crate, leaving it 2 meters inside the vestibule. I do not accept outside commissions. If this service has been of use to you, please consider rewarding my employers with a plus. Machines were impervious to Nico's stare, but she tried one anyway. This service has not been of use to me, she said. My employers are sorry you feel that way, the bot said, and exited. Nico looked the crate over. Made of white enameled plasmetal, it floated a few inches above the ground. A sturdy handle on each of the narrower ends provided the means with which to move it. The label simply bore Nico's full name, along with the address of the restaurant. The orange ticket that would have disclosed its point of origin seemed to have been torn away. Nico scowled at it and left it where it was. She found her second in command waiting in her office. He silently handed her a sheet of plastic. Looking it over, she raised an eyebrow. Eggplant? She said incredulously. Where am I going to get eggplant? Short of you finding some cut-rate sorcerer. None of the big farm ships grow it except the Mannon, and their prices are twice anyone else's. She frowned at Dabry in the office's dim light. Nico was of indeterminate human mix, with pale brown skin and graying dreadlocks swept back and contained on the back of her head with an ivory beaded net. Muscular shoulders rounded out her white chef's jacket, its front unpinned and fallen awry, bearing coffee stains along one sleeve. Although Nico was tall, the being, also wearing a chef's jacket, although significantly less crumpled and stained, hulking across from where she sat at the tiny desk, dwarfed her. He was an Edelite, an 8-foot-tall humanoid with 4 arms and skin the color of the eggplant they had been discussing. Dabry, aka Sergeant Dabry, also retired from the ranks of the Holy Hive Mind, folded both pairs of arms and stared at her impassively. The critic, he rumbled, is said to have a weakness for old earth food from the Mediterranean region. I need to analyze the components if I'm going to replicate it. You are all way too concerned about this critic, Nico said. Ever since Skidoo found out who booked the reservation, you have been ridiculous. Cleaning, which I do approve of. Redecorating, which I approve of up to a certain budgetary point. But now, rearranging the menu just for them? They had the power to give our restaurant a nickel orb, Dabry said. His tone implied that once a restaurant had achieved such a thing, everyone in it might as well go ahead and die happily, their life goals attained. They had been operating the Last Chance for little over a solar year now, and Dabry tracked its few reviews and mentions with a gleeful zeal. This restaurant, Nico said, not for the first time, was not my idea. This restaurant, Dabry said, also not for the first time, got us all out of the Holy Hive Mind service and let us keep what we could of the company together while we try to build our finances. Nico sighed and pushed away the piece of plastic. They were in her tiny office, which had once been a walk-in closet and still smelled of artificial cedar and orange from the scent unit near the fan. She kept saying she meant to disable it because of its rattle. While she groused about the unit and its rattle, though, she didn't mind it really. It overrode other smells from the kitchen only a few steps farther down the tin tube of a hallway, along with their associated memories. Cinnamon, when Millie was baking, reminded her of free trade life and came on a wash of loss and nostalgia. Stale dishwater reminded her of IAPH, wafting on fear and regret. And vinegar's tang, once such a clean smell to her, crept on the door under the doorway every once so often, and seeping with it came the despair and terror of life in the Holy Hive Mind's barracks. The office was still lined on 2 sides with shelves, now holding a mix of data pads, books, clothes, and miscellaneous ordnance and knives, as well as a hanging rack half full of white chef's jackets, the other half full of disused civvies. A folding cot was jammed up against the wall behind her, next to 2 crates filled with glossy black rocks left over from the redecorating effort. Past menus were sticking to the wall, the plastic slips fluttering whenever the door opened or closed. She narrowed her eyes at Dabry. I know, she said, and that was not the worst plan you've ever come up with, but you're taking it so seriously. It's a restaurant, a glorified location for the satisfaction of one of the most basic urges. Dabry pointed 2 lower fingers at her in emphasis, and you cannot talk like that, or they will know you are not an artist. Nico shuddered. When it came to retiring from the Holy Hive Mind, there were few acceptable ways. Most of its soldiers stayed in the army until they died, and a few of them long after that. She would have been one of those few, her brain extracted upon death and moved into a Holy Hive Mind container, reanimated to serve as part of its consciousness. Not a fate she had anticipated with pleasure. So when Dabry had come to her with a crazy plan to claim that Nico was a thwarted artist, that being one of the sacred occupations, and that her medium was cooking, that being her single talent, she'd been willing to play along. A vast amount of bribery and wheedling had gone into the escape, but in the end, she'd been able to use her considerable back wages, combined with those of her crew who wanted to come along and who she declared part of her immediate family, to buy a small establishment aboard one of the largest space stations around, Twice-Far Station, relic of some long-forgotten race, and now home to dozens of alien species. Nico fixed her former sergeant with a stare that had straightened soldierly spines, cowed bureaucrats, and put the fear of the holy hive mind into her enemies more than once. But Dabri, inoculated by long exposure, gave her a bland look back. "You know it as well as I do, Captain," he said. "The holy hive mind is still keeping tabs on us. If they suspected that you thought of the restaurant as something other than an artistic enterprise, they would haul you back and scoop the brains out of your head." "I am an artist," she said, "just not in the way that they think of artists. The holy hive mind definition is a cross between an addict and an artist possessed by their muse, unable to help from creating. It's hard to keep convincing it of that. You're right, an orb would cement me as that kind of artist." She frowned at her second in command. Dabri had turned out to have an unexpected flair for all of this. He was the one who'd found the odd little space that they'd turned into the restaurant, a former bar built by Dorlians, who'd fled the place when a particular side effect of their inhabitation became too much for them. Dorlians leave what some species might call ghosts behind them, and these spirits, while no longer sentient, still inhabited the space in the form of long, glowing blue worms swimming through the air, which their maitre d', Lasite, had incorporated into the decor. Over the past year, and particularly in recent months, the restaurant had proved surprisingly successful. Something about the shadowy decor hadn't lured the criminals who Nico had feared, but diners who sought privacy and exclusivity, lovers, those wishing to become lovers, diplomats, people with other people that they wanted to impress. "Speaking of which, shouldn't I be planning this meal?" Nico grumbled. "You said I could take this one," Dabri protested. It had pained him to have had to step back and let Nico take the wheel the last time they'd presented to the holy hive mind, a yearly requirement of their situation. "All right," Nico said. She waved her hand. "Go forth. And if you truly desire an eggplant to dissect, then who am I to stand in your way? Place an order with the Manon." Dabri hesitated. Nico's eyes narrowed farther. "What?" "An order from the Manon," Dabri said, "would take over a sleep unit to get there. Too late. Then where are you planning on getting it?" "I have a favor due me," Dabri said with dignity. "Do I want to know anything about the nature of this favor or what you intend to do with it?" "Probably not, other than I will obtain an eggplant with it." "Then I'm not even sure why you're telling me." Nico threw up her hands in exasperation. Sometimes she thought Dabri enjoyed these encounters. The more expressionless he remained, the more convinced of that she became. She began to add a remark to that effect, but a flurry of knocks on the door interrupted her. Only one of her workers knocked like that. "Come in, Skidoo," she called. The entity who entered was unlike either of the beings already in the room. Skidoo was a Tlellan, which humans sometimes called squids for their resemblance to one of the few Terran creatures left alive. Her 10 limbs functioned as either arms or legs to propel her sack-like body along. Atop that squat bundle was a lump that served as head, fixed with 3 bright blue eyes. Unlike Terran squids, she was colored as brightly as a festival, purples and reds variegating across blue and yellow dots and stripes. "I am being securing an important reservation," she announced. "We're not taking any more reservations for tonight," Nico said. "I told you that already. We've got this stupid food critic arriving." Skidoo wilted. "But this is being a very large party," she said. "Even worse," Dabri said. "How large?" "Possibly they are being sane as many as 20. 20? We don't have room for that. We'd have to rearrange one of the back chambers," Nico protested. "They are being sane. They are knowing you, Captain, so I am taking the reservation," Skidoo said. "Did they give you a name?" Skidoo drew herself up as much as possible in order to deliver this information in a suitably grand manner. Admiral Taclibia. Taclibia, here? Nico was flabbergasted. The one you served under, Dabri asked. I did, but I was only an aide. They wouldn't remember me. Apparently they do, and enough to seek out your restaurant. Nico shook her head. She was about to tell Skidoo to cancel the reservation when the door flew open with a crash. Millie, her new pastry chef, stuck her head in, just the beak face at the end of a long white-feathered neck, giving the impression of a disembodied head. The boys are fighting in the storage room again, she gasped in her high fluting voice and clapped her beak urgently. Swearing under her breath, Nico rose. She pointed at Skidoo and Dabri. Take care of it, she told Dabri, and went to tame her lions.
Okay. Well, I saw at least one review where they described this as Farscape meets the Great British Bake Off. When I started reading the book, I wasn't really sure how the hell that could be possible. But I got to tell you that my response to reading the book so far, and I'm not quite done, I thought it would be good not to have the ending so I can't spoil it, is not to say Rob McKinley's Sunshine, but I had such a craving for cupcakes. With all the food in the book, the cookies and the cupcakes got my attention, of course. And I don't want to give away too much of the plot, but let's just say that it's not all set in the restaurant. I thought once the restaurant part was gone, the food would go away. Much to my surprise, oh no, it's a very important part of the book, and much more than I expected. If you want to say more about the part with the sergeant and his new pupil, would that give away too much of the plot? Maybe
you could say a little bit about it.
I mean, they're on a sentient ship, and the ship is well, it's a bioship, and it seems, I think it's pretty damn intelligent. And the part where the sergeant starts explaining what the difference is between the stuff you pull out of a freezer and why the food is better cooked by hand rather than the ship's like, but it all tastes the same. And he's like, no, it doesn't. And even if it does, it should, you know, there's a point to the art of cooking. The ship's very interested in learning all this stuff. And I was just picturing at some point the ship making a humanoid robot to take part in this, but so far we haven't gotten to that part, at least.
Not yet. Ha! That's awesome.
Did you always plan to have food be like such a key part of the plot? Because I was quite surprised.
I'm a bit of a foodie, and I really enjoy both cooking and going out to nice places. And yeah, when I sat down, I was like, I'll have them do a restaurant because that way I'll get to write about food. And that's been fun because it's actually the next book. I'm kind of like talking a lot about a particular alien cuisine. And I'm going to keep it going all through, I think.
Well, this is not the one that's called To Serve Mankind.
No, not that one.
That would not make me happy. I don't know. I put this. Pretty much everybody on the crew except for Nico, I would argue, is not really a normal human being or a human race at all. I kept waiting for Nico to suddenly rip off her clothes and turn out she's actually a vampire or something. But as far as I can tell, she's a regular Homo sapiens, but everybody else isn't. In some ways that are quite surprising sometimes. Was that the plan all along? Were you trying to give us a little tour of the galaxy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wanted to do that for a couple of reasons. And one is that I absolutely love Farscape. And so and you could probably tell, throughout this whole book, my love of Farscape shines through. And I like Farscape because it is that ensemble of aliens and only one human. And it also lets me talk about, lets me present a range of perceptions. And I think that's really interesting to do. So, yeah, it's fun.
Okay. I forgot his name in my brain, but there's the little priest, the last side. Now, no, he doesn't look like him, but I kept picturing Eeyore in my head. I figured if he was in audio, this would be what he would sound like, kind of like, it's all right.
That's it.
We're all going to die. But he's got this whole grand prophecy set, which we know very little. I wonder how far we're going to get there, but they're not going to reveal the whole thing for another book or two, I think.
Oh, no.
He's got this, what do you call it? The grand spiral of destiny.
The golden spiral of destiny. Yeah.
Which makes me think it's like Paul Muad'Dib looking in the future, or like in the Avengers, where Doctor Strange looks forward and only one pathway is good, and all the rest end up with the universe being totally screwed. And I'm thinking their odds aren't all that great so far, but it has been an interesting little journey, but I really like the priest. He really grew on me.
Did you ever watch the Banana Splits back in the day? And they had the Lilliputians, and there was one of the Lilliputians who was always like, "We'll never make it." And I think that might be Lucite.
I remember watching the last Splits. I think I was more entranced with the Three Musketeers and the Adventures of Sinbad, because they had the donkey, like you pulled the donkey's tail.
Oh yeah,
he turned into a whirling dervish or something.
I'd forgotten the donkey.
I must say I was taken with that. Well, before you just talk exclusively about the book, I was curious how I always thought of, if you had to run SFWA, it's probably like not only herding cats, but herding a bunch of disagreeable, angry cats. Anything you want to say about
herding disagreeable cats? Well, I think SFWA is so interesting because people talk about like SFWA this and SFWA that, but the truth of the matter is SFWA is made up of volunteers. And not entirely volunteers, because there's some paid staff there as well, but it's the people who make it up. And so there are changes that occur over the course of time. And I think SFWA is moving into the future in the same way that humanity is, one would think. But it's been interesting to watch, because there has, like science fiction, there's been some lurches, there's been some missteps, and I think that the friends that I made through SFWA are some of the best that I've made in my life. I really found being the president was irritating and annoying and frustrating, but at the same time, it was glorious at times. And there were just some really lovely moments when something finally came to fruition, like bringing independently published writers into the organization. And the day that finally went through, after literally years of effort, not me, but a whole bunch of different people, seeing that finally manifest was just wonderful.
Well, I could be wrong, but last time I checked, the rule on the Grand Master was still the president of SFWA basically got to pick it. It's every 2 years, and the author has to be alive. Has there ever been any talk about changing that? Because one of the things that always stuck in my craw was that Roger Zelazny would never get the name because he died before most anybody knew he was ill.
And Terry Pratchett is another person who definitely should have gotten it but passed. I've been thinking about that, and part of, I think it is great to celebrate the people that shape science fiction. I would like to see that happening, but I also would like to see something honoring the people who are kind of moving it forward right now, the people who are doing kind of really wonderful stuff. And I would say, for example, Nora Jemisin. Nora Jemisin is writing just freaking amazing stuff and moving the genre forward and working in not just novel, but in comics as well. There should be an award that acknowledges people like that. Right? They're just like, holy cow, this person's at the top of their game and they are shaping, the things for the future. I think that would be really nice.
I agree. I still remember that they gave this band called A Taste of Honey the best new Grammy years ago. And of all the bands nominated, it's the only one that never managed to spit.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story, which is one of the perks of being a SFWA president is you get to chase down whoever it is that's going to be the Grandmaster. And I say chase down because it's always a huge pain in the ass. And I kept trying to get CJ Cherry. And I was like pinging her, and I'm like pinging her. And finally I messaged her on Facebook and I was like, Carolyn, I really kind of need to talk to you. It's good. And she's like, Kat, I can't volunteer for SFWA right now. No, it's okay.
I think every time I've trucked, the irony with CJ is I saw her once years ago in their WestCon. They didn't tell me she was coming, so we didn't bring any books because she wasn't officially there.
Yeah.
And the only time she's come here and signed for us was when she still lived in Oklahoma.
Oh yeah.
Since they moved to Eastern Washington, they've never made it out here.
Oh.
Admittedly, like there was cats dying and they had to move out of their building. They've had 3 or 4 crises, but I've kind of given up. But if I need to talk to her, I send Jane a note because Jane usually at least reads the email.
Yeah.
Carolyn, much as I think she's awesome, she is not the best. I've even sent some people messages on Facebook to friends because I still am trying to avoid being on there, and it doesn't always work. hadn't thought about that. You get a bunch of old curmudgeonly folks. You get Greg Cox sometime to discuss how dealing with the Conan associates was, much as he was a reverent toward Conan, all these folks were like between 80 and 90 and curmudgeonly, like, where's my check? And stuff. When he got to pass that on, he was like, all right, it's their problem now. It's not like,
God, yeah.
Where was I? So we don't go into a lot in the first book. I'm assuming we're going to see more of this later on, but Nico was and wants to again be a free trader, which really to me resonated. I mean, Paul Anderson did some stuff with this Heinlein, but I always think of Andre Norton. She had the clans and their own starships, and that's where I thought maybe you might have gotten inspired by it.
That is exactly it. Andre Norton was a huge inspiration to me. She's one of the people who I read, and I grew up pre-internet, so we went back and reread books over and over again. If you were a reader, because there was nothing else. And Andre Norton was always a wonderful reread. I loved the free trader stuff. So
I wish her stuff was more out there. I mean, my recollection of Norton, and I've read an awful lot of them, was that it wasn't so much the characters. The characters are often kind of interchangeable, but it's the worlds and the situations they ended up in, Zero Stone and all the various magic witch world stuff.
Oh, yeah,
there's some great stuff in there. Which brings us to the pirates. So one of Kat's little things, so I'm not really clear on how long this timeline occurred, but she gets captured by these charming interstellar pirates and doesn't really they sort of have a deal with the free traders so they can get the ransom, but her problem is she's got a member of her ship, if not her crew, which they argue isn't a member of the crew, and they aren't going to bother the ransom, and this makes Nico kind of unhappy and causes this whole mess, which is now going to come back and smack her in the face years later. So I was curious, was that originally part of the plot, or was that just something, because the character Battaglia is certainly unusual to say the least.
Yeah. Well, two things happened. And one is that I totally pantsed my way into this book. I sat down and just started going and wrote kind of in consecutive order all the way through, and was half the time just like, oh, and then there's this person. But the space pirates are also kind of a joke in that back in the day when I first started editing fantasy magazine, it was at a year in science fiction when there had been 3 separate speculative pirate anthologies, because it was just after, like, what is it, the Johnny Depp Pirates of the Caribbean had come out, and so everybody was like, oh, pirates. And so there's 3 anthologies and like 2 theme issues of magazines. And what happened was that I, at Fantasy, then got all of the stories that had kind of made it through the different mills. So I wasn't getting like the cream of the crop. I mean, sometimes I was getting something that had been through everything. And I got to the point where it's just like, oh, God damn, another pirate. And if, and then so that was my joke. Like, whenever I've edited, I've just been like, no, I'm not going to take space pirates. I'm not going to take any kind of pirates. And so to put them in this book is kind of
I see. Yeah, it's like, how many years was it that every single author knew to decide it's the year I have to write a Mars novel? In the course of like 3 years, every damn SF writer I know put out a Mars novel, and several really good ones. But after about 6 or 7 of them, I was kind of sick of them. I mean,
well, it's something in the zeitgeist, and I've noticed this before. Like, I edited an anthology that was about near future science fiction called "If This Goes On," and it was kind of like, if Trump keeps on doing things the way he is, where will the world look a generation from now? And there were 3 themes that I just got so many stories on, and one of them was, strangely enough, pandemics. Another was people living underwater. And the third was people getting so hungry that they ate dogs. And I got like 6 of these stories that were about eating dogs. And I was like, it's just freaking bizarre.
It strikes me like a twisted version of the Chick-fil-A thing with the cows who like eat more chicken. It's like the cats are going, here, eat the dogs. Eat the dogs.
It was crazy. I mean, like, I went and looked at the guidelines to say, did I put that in an example? No.
Well, I mean, it could be worse. You could have got 18 stories about Soylent Green.
No, good. That's true. but like I could only use one of them because if I'd used two, then it would have become, oh, it's that anthology where they're eating the dogs. And just would have been
Yes. I was sitting there trying to rack my brain as we were having one of those post-event confabs a while back. We used to hang out at the old bar across the fence, which isn't currently got a bar in it, but there's new hotel there. And one of the guys said he'd killed the puppy in the store, where they're like, "No, you actually killed the puppy?" Because that's like supposed to be totally verboten. You're not supposed to do that. I can't remember who it was. So if remember who it was, feel free to send the note there because I'd like to remember. Because the only other story I remember about dogs is the one that I think it was Ken Scholes wrote the story. I didn't go to his event. It was another bookstore. And I think I was working that night. But afterwards, my friends explained to me why this is a good example of why you should read your short story out loud first. Because it's a story about Lewis and Clark and the
I know this one.
You know the story, right? And so Lewis had a big it wasn't a German Shepherd, but a big hunting fierce dog that they actually was quite useful, and the dog's name was Seaman, Seaman. And so my friend's going along and reading the short story. In the middle of it, he says it in kind of a hurry, but he says the line, and then Seaman bursts from the bushes. He looks up at his entire crowd and he starts. And ever since then, I thought of unintended consequences of things that you didn't plan in your story, that probably that one you didn't want, because the crowd at that point is too busy laughing to really care about the rest of what you're doing. Speaking of which, you've written how many short stories and novelettes and so on and so on? How do they just sort of pop out every so often, or do you actually have a plan for write 2 short stories, go write a novel? I mean,
I've written over 250, and a lot of, sometimes like people ask me to do them for an anthology or whatever, but a lot of times they just come to me and I feel like I want to write them down because they're interesting. And sometimes I don't know everything that's going to happen in the story, so I want to find out.
Do you ever take
I do.
Oh, sorry.
What?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, like if I'm working on a long project, that's when all the stories appear, right? Like I should be working on a novel and suddenly like 500 stories and be like, hey, don't you want to write me? And stories are tempting because you can sit down and finish a story. Whereas with a novel, you can sit down and get a few thousand words and still be like, well, I got 68,000 to go or whatever.
Well, I was thinking about that because I think about, not to pick on the guy, with Howard Waldrop, who is one of the giants of the field among the people in the field. But I think Howard's ever only finished 2 novels, one of which he co-wrote. And his short stories, I mean, we're generally lucky he gets 1 out a year. Although I haven't seen Howard since he moved to Texas. Maybe he's popped out more stories and I haven't seen it lately. But George Martin came here for the second book in the series for Clash of Kings, and he started reading this letter from a fan about how's your health? You got the whole series plot out? Does your wife know where your notes are? And it got to the point where it said, so who's going to finish this off if you, unfortunately, die? And 2 of us looked around and pointed immediately at Howard, who was in the audience, and Howard turned bright red to the hill. No. The joke was it would take 100 years for Howard to write the series, but of course, no offense, George isn't doing much better right now. I am a little frustrated with authors who cannot produce a series. That once you start a series, you should have a plan to finish it at some point. I can name a couple people that we know of and a few others we don't, that just never seem to. So thankfully, you tend to produce a book every reasonably short time, and your short stories come out fairly frequently. It's nice to see somebody who can deliver on a deadline, seems to be.
Well, I was a little late on the second book, but that was because of the pandemic, I think. I want to give people, if people don't know Howard Waldrop and love short stories, you should definitely check out his short stories, and particularly Night of the Cooters, which is one of my favorite short stories.
Oh, he's a very talented writer. He's a very charming raconteur. He can tell a great story. I just wish he could write his short stories half as fast. Howard's going to probably email me and tell me to drop dead now. That'd be okay. I haven't talked to him in years. It'd be great. There's so many in the field people in the field we haven't seen. So you're going to be coming to Emerald City early next month. And for those folks that don't know, we'll be having, you're going to be on some panels. You'll sign after the panels. You'll probably sign separately at the booth. So if you can't get a book from her now, come look her up at Emerald City.
Absolutely.
So people always talk about where their characters from. Did anybody in this one, especially your space pirate with the big grudge, is there anybody based on partly anyone you know, or is it all just totally created from scratch?
It's pretty much created from scratch, although Dabry in my head kind of resembles a four-armed Mr. Clean. So I don't know what. I don't like basing characters on people that I know, because then you're kind of starting with a pre-made template. It's more interesting to kind of find out what they are.
Well, one of my questions was going to be, so if you plot the whole series out, but since you said you pants the entire first book, how much do you have in mind for the rest of things?
So I have like an incredibly rough outline that focuses on the long-running romance line that I have running through it. But I do have, I've got, basically I have 10 notebook pages, each of which kind of says notes about what I think is going to happen. But one of the things I know, because I'm writing it, sort of pantsing my way into it, so much is going to change, right? There's going to be new stuff that pops up. There's going to be new wonderful possibilities that I haven't even spotted.
Well, I always remember the conversation with Robin Hobb when she was getting notes back for her English editor on like book 7 or 8 of the Farseer Chronicles. And one of the problems with the series that long is there's a lot of characters, a lot of timeline. But it's nice to have a continuity person to, when her English editor sent a note saying, no offense, but you got the dead guy rowing the boat. The guy she killed in the book or two back, and she'd forgotten, and it wasn't one of the major characters. It's easy to do that sort of thing. So you may have that issue because you've never written anything more than two or three books long, have you? This is going to be more.
No,
right?
well, the Tibet books, I'm about to start the 4th on that.
Oh, one more to go. Okay.
But like, I talked to Ann Leckie about this one point. She's talking about space operas, and she suggested using a wiki. And so I have like a desktop wiki, which I think it ends up being a really good way to keep notes. The thing that I'm bad about is I come up with these names and don't say them in my head. And then they mail and say, hey, how about the audiobook pronunciations? And I'm just like, what did I know?
Well, at least you did do the part a couple authors I know have done where they write you little pithy little quotes from characters to begin their chapters, like Bob Aspirin.
Oh, I loved his.
Or like Richard Morgan had all those little Zen socialist quotes. And then he said when he wrote book 3, he said they're always, oh crap, I've got to actually have the coherent assembled philosophy, because they're going back to his homeworld and they're going to meet somebody, if not the actual person.
Yeah.
And I never should have done this, not putting this crap together in the first place.
That's so the fear, right?
So at least you haven't gotten into yourself any of those traps right there where you go, oh, I should never done that.
Not yet.
So go ahead.
Margaret is asking how I came up with the title. And I'm going to say it just sort of arrived out of nowhere, where I was suddenly like, the ship's name is You Sexy Thing, because it's just so freaking cool. And that we actually went back and forth about the name, because like at first Tor was like, no, we don't think so. We're going to come up with a different name. And then they would send some good names, and I'd be like, yeah. I'd be like, well, how about Ancillary Restaurant or Pop-Up Diner at the End of the Universe? They'd be like, you're not taking this seriously. And then finally, finally they came back and it said, marketing said we're going to lean into it. And I was like, okay, I've gotten my way. This is awesome.
Well, look at this way. At least they didn't put a bimbo on the cover to go with it. That might have been a little too much, right? It's Captain Nico Larson, Nico, the sexy, hive mind.
No, it's the ship. The ship's the sexy one.
I know,
right?
but I'm just saying that doesn't stop marketers and all from doing weird covers. I could give
the cover. Shout out to the artist Mike Heath, who did that amazing image for the cover. I just love it. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, there's a little bit of discussion too about how people get around the galaxy. I was a little confused. So they have faster and light travel, but they also have basically sort of tame wormholes that are from an ancient species or something like that. I got the impression. Portholes.
There are these. There's gates, and most galaxies have a gate in them, and then so the gates allow for kind of like travel between galaxies. But the thing about galaxies is that they're still pretty large, so there still has to be faster than light travel that moves kind of within the galaxy. So this is all, I will confess, somewhat retrofitted in that I went to the Launchpad. Margaret's laughing because she was there with me. Went to Launchpad astrophysics and astronomy workshop this summer in Wyoming. And while I was there, I was like, oh, this is how it all works. And now I have a much better idea of the mechanics of it or the science of it. But the first book is, there's a certain amount of hand wavium lurking.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, depending, you talk to their physicists who swear we'll never have faster than light travel, and it's all holcomb and blah blah blah. But it, having space opera at slower than light travel is going to be a pretty boring series.
Yeah, yeah.
You can build a series that way, but it won't be space opera.
Yeah. Well, and it lets me kind of play with things, like the gates kind of being the way between galaxies controls travel, it controls exploration. And because they're these ancient alien relics that nobody quite understands, there's a certain amount of danger to them as well.
You know, saying who's the first person to jump through the new one? I might
yeah.
I wouldn't want to have that job necessarily unless I'm on a specifically designed interstellar, explorer ship or something.
Who's the first human being who ate cheese? All right, sorry.
That's okay. I love cheese. Also, I'm more of a cheddar guy. Some of the stuff your chef cooks, I kind of was going, I'm not eating that. I don't care how good it is. I try to be open-minded, and I'll try most anything once. Some of the stuff he was cooking, I don't like eggplant. Sorry, but
I'm testing a cookie recipe actually. So when I come on Saturday to sign books, I might bring you some cookies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm a big sucker.
That's acceptable.
Snickerdoodles, chocolate chip cookies, things like that. If it's anything too almond,
I won't bring you eggplant. No eggplant cookies.
Well, that's good. I think you have a limited market for that one. There's probably a chef somewhere can make us eat it and think it was wonderful, but I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure.
So talk about your online school. I hadn't really heard about this. So I was looking at your bio, and they've got the online school.
I've been doing this for about 10 years now, actually. I used to teach for Bellevue Community College, a class on writing fantasy and science fiction that actually Louise Marley had passed to me. She had taught it, and then she wanted to pass it on and give it to me. And there was a point where I was looking at what Bellevue Community College was paying me versus what the students were paying. And I was like, wow, there's a certain discrepancy there. And Google Hangouts had just come out. And so I decided to set up an online school, and I taught some classes on it. I brought Ann Leckie in, was the first outside person I brought in to teach. I've had Shannon McGuire's come and taught, Fran Wild, Tobias Bacal, Sarah Pinsker. Yeah, we've had a lot of, it's great because I get to sit in on classes with kind of world-class teachers. So I get better all the time too.
And all the money goes right to the authors as opposed to going to the college, right? Which I'm sure.
Yeah.
I rarely, there have been publishers, other people in business that make me crazy, but the ones that pay the authors the money up front or first, I'm thinking I can put up this crap as long as they're paying the author. I still remember when, that was the publisher, Stephen Pagel's press decided to go belly up, and a couple authors I know literally only survived because Bill at Subterranean was giving the mice they could buy eggs and peanut butter and stuff. And that made me endeared to him for years. I mean, I think anyone actually lets the author buy food is a winner for me. I try not to have any.
This industry is not one that anybody should go into if they're thinking, boy, I want the shekels, right? I want the money. Is not,
I'm not sure I've ever met anyone who set out to be a best-selling author, period, and did it without any serious mistakes along the way, or just plain luck. Every story I can recall personally, the author became famous. I mean, I remember when people suddenly wanted the new picture book by Peter Seuss. Now, Peter Seuss had been mentored by Sendak. He'd been reputably, and he'd been getting published, but frankly, no one really gave a damn. And then all of a sudden, everybody wanted his new book. And we finally figured out the reason why was because it had been the list of books that Jackie Onassis was working on before she died.
Oh.
Like, that's a hell of a way to make yourself a bestseller.
Yeah.
And it's hard to actually, I'll kill my editor who happens to be famous right before my book comes out. It's just not the way it's very predictable.
There's some Tor people in the audience. You're not
She's just kidding. No one will get shot.
No, it's all safe. It's all safe, Desiree.
Well, I love most of Tor people, but occasionally. I still love it.
Dave, I got the nicest email this morning saying happy book birthday, and it was so sweet. It's just been a glorious day.
And it was just your birthday too, right? We couldn't actually
send it. Was my birthday, yeah, 2 days ago.
So I figure this is all like a birthday celebration. So people definitely go out and buy your book. Now, hopefully from me, but if they don't buy it from me, buy it from some other nice independent bookstore out there. There's no more questions in the panel list, people. Come on, throw some questions in there. Okay, well, otherwise I'm going to run out of stuff to drive Cat crazy with here. Well, we are hopefully running down COVID slowly, and maybe by next. I mean, I had planned all these events live. You were one of the first 2 or 3 authors I thought about. You and Sherry Priest and a couple of the people. Yeah. We were going to have all these live events in the store this fall, and that didn't work out so well. We have had a couple folks come and sit there and just sign. The people come up and get a book and they leave, and nobody hangs out in the lines for hours. But
it's hard. I think I know for me, because I like interacting with people, this whole thing has been kind of a little nut making every once in a while. But yeah, I'm going to Indiana next week flying, and I'll be looking forward to seeing family.
Really put a hood on, and
oh God, if I could just like be in a big plastic bag on the plane, I would do that.
I was picturing the old Mad magazine where the smokers on the plane were wearing plastic face masks with tubes so they could smoke and not bother them else. I'm picturing that we're not that far away from people walking in full hazmat suits or something. That would probably freak out the crew and the passengers more than anything else. Why is this guy wearing a hazmat suit? What do they know that I don't know? I mean, I think that would be. Oh yeah, the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers. Ed put the link up there. I like the Wayward Writers part. But how old are you and Lucky? Because I noticed you dedicated the book tour, and I didn't realize you guys were that tight.
We were in Clarion West together.
Oh God, I forgot.
And yeah, I kind of tease her because I'm like, you want to talk about the bad people to be in a Clarion West class with. Try being in a class with somebody whose first novel wins the Hugo, the Nebula, the British Science Fiction Award. I mean, just like the triple, what is it they call it? Like when you win the Triple Crown, right? And you win the Kentucky Derby and all of those.
That's the Triple Crown racing. I don't know if there's a word for it in science fiction. I'll tell you the one that occurred that I had once in an email conversation that I think I've lost them. I wish I had them. Years ago, Leslie asked me to invite a certain author for Clarion West. Said, will you talk to the guy once in a while? I said, yeah, I'll send a note. And I sent this guy a note and I said, they're interested in you for Clarion West. And I know what I said, it wasn't like I just said, come visit Seattle and do this stuff.
Right.
And so Neil Gaiman writes back, says, well, I've always thought about attending Clarion West. I'm going, attending? Can you imagine? And mind you, this was not 30 years ago. This was like 15 years ago. Can you imagine you're in a room and suddenly you realize that one of the guys in your class is Neil Gaiman? You would just, I think, want to cut your wrist.
That's just be like, no, Neil Gaiman, no.
And I'm like, no, they actually were thinking of you teaching Clarion West.
I will tell like a story from Clarion West. I'm going to tell it. It's too bad Lecky's not watching, and I'm going to tell this tomorrow because I'm doing an event with her.
Okay.
But like I came down from Clarion West. It was like week 5 or week 6, and everybody's very low energy then. And it was her and my friend Steven, and I forget who else. And they're sitting there on the sofa, and they're grumping, and they're like, 10 years from now, everyone's gonna know the name. And they mentioned Swirsky, which actually was right. And then they mentioned 2 other classmates who since have dropped off the face of the earth. And I said, and I'm embellishing, every time I tell this, it's a little better. But like, and I said, Lecky, no, this is not gonna happen. I said, within 10 years, I'm gonna go to a con and I'm gonna see people cosplaying your rad sheet characters, and lo and behold, what happens now? We do have people cosplaying rad sheet characters because I'm a genius and I recognized it.
Well, it's not standing on brooms chasing around the pole doing fake footage. I've always thought the Quidditch game itself was amusing, but watching people do it in the real world, no, I don't think that certain things don't translate too well. No. I don't miss the Camarilla that used to be around the WestCon. Remember those guys?
Oh, I don't remember those guys.
The Vampire Society that took it all just a little too seriously.
I had somebody did a really I thought incredibly a bit shitty thing to me where I was walking along the hallway. It was like Friday evening, and this young guy came. Oh, it's so nice to see you, and he acted like he knew me. And I was like, oh, you know, kind of as one does. And then he starts laughing. He goes, "I don't know you." Walks away. I'm just like, what the fuck, dude?
It happens to me all the time. Like at a Worldcon, especially. I haven't been to one in quite a while, but you go there and the badge names are all the same for the pros and the writers.
Yeah.
And I kind of prefer the fact where, like, you know, a green badge means you're an artist, and a red badge means you're a writer, and so means you're a panelist. And they're all the same tiny print. And I'm looking at people trying to figure out what the hell their name is because I don't remember. I'm terrible at it. I'm terrible.
Oh no! I mean, it'd be nice if people had the names on the forehead, and then you would never have to worry about it. But that might.
What I need is a version of Robert Heinlein had the it's a double star with the guy's impersonating the guy. Eventually it comes like 20 minutes, and he has like a earpiece, and as the guy with the computer, and tells him, "Oh, it's this so and so. He's the prime minister so and so. His wife likes soccer and so on." And, yeah, where's that one? I need smart glasses or something where it would just pop on your retina or something like, this is that crazy bookstore you met 20 years ago that thinks you're buddies.
See, that would be great. Actually, I would sign up for that.
Oh, maybe when Google or somebody comes up with what was it, smart glass, or what was that stuff they were trying to push a few years ago, which didn't really.
There were a lot of privacy issues with that.
Yeah, it'd still be handy, but I don't necessarily need to have the scene that has creeped me out for years, and I haven't seen a lot of it in books since then. But when they made the movie out of Minority Report, and Tom Cruise walked into the mall, and every single ad personalized his character, that made me just go, "There goes your privacy."
That's gonna happen.
I sure will. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on the school because I only deal in cash. I won't give you my cell phone, you know, but
I mean, when you go on social media, right, on Facebook, that's what's happening. The algorithm is determining what you see is for. I mean, like I think it's kind of eerie, right? You'll be shopping for something online, and then you'll go on Facebook, and suddenly there's like 3 ads for the same thing you were looking at.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that there aren't more. Maybe because it's gotten overdone with your characters, for example. They were linked in the army, which was like sort of a high, like I don't know,
Holy Hive Mind.
Holy Hive Mind Army, and they were linked to sort of one group, and the captain could sort of feel everybody. It wasn't so much like they're all like wired to the web and constantly popping over the future version of their smartphone or something. At least they seem to have gotten past that phase in our I guess some hope it will evolve through the current phase we're in now, where if people had their phone network crashed, I think they would all lose their minds right now. It's like, oh my God, it's been like, was it Facebook went down for less than a day and people freaked out of their minds? I'm like,
oh God. Well, I mean, part of that was, and there's countries where Facebook is the way a lot of people do business and talk to people and order food and all of that.
No, there was that Simon Mitchell book years ago where everybody was using basically sort of like smart glasses, and the one character loses hers. They're very custom made, and she won't get them for weeks. And so she goes outside to get some coffee, and the vendor doesn't see her because he's got his smart glasses on.
Yeah.
He takes all his orders. When she has to go up and tap him on the back, and he jumps in the air, and the buses only stop when you ping them. And she suddenly realizes there's this whole other world of people that aren't on the network versus everyone else that is. And I think we're heading that direction. And I find that kind of concerning.
Oh, absolutely.
On the other hand,
it's really interesting. Yeah. What?
Almost everybody has a cell phone now, so we're not going to cut everybody out that way. At least, even the homeless people carry on better phones than I have. It seems like it's interesting how they pour $1,000 into a cell phone. I don't know.
Well, I mean, nowadays the cell phone is how you get email, and it's such a necessary implement, right? It's become something that we depend on more and more.
Well, I was thinking of that because I talked to some of the younger people that come through, and email's kind of like the younger generation doesn't use it. They're too busy. They're too busy texting and IMing and stuff. They don't use email unless it's for work. Whereas our generation pretty much absorbed email, and we may curse at it, but it's awfully handy a lot of the time too. I mean, trying to call people in New York in the old days, or people in England, they're all different hours away from us, and now you send them an email, and they usually will reply within a day or so. Whereas before, I don't want to get woken up at 2 a.m. by somebody calling about some question that. Authors, of course, keep weird hours. Are you a night owl? I couldn't remember what your schedule was.
I'm actually one of those awful people that gets up at 5:30 or 6 a.m. usually. So
that's never going to be me. I mean, I can do it if I have to, but I'm one of those people who wish they drank coffee when they get up in the morning. I think, well, I really shouldn't have a bag of donuts and a bottle of pop for breakfast. But
there you go. There you go.
Okay, folks, last chance for questions. Nobody's popped anymore there. You guys are disappointing me. I thought we'd have some really doozies here, because Cat will answer anything pretty much, right? Well, almost.
Don't dare some of them to come up with questions. I see.
Well,
I would not dare.
Well, one of the things I've looked at in the recent time that I never would have seen coming is the whole people look at their emails they all now are using gender pronouns, and that just makes me go. So if I said she instead of they to you, would it make you?
No, I will go by they or she. I like they because I feel uncomfortable with some aspects of the way we look at gender and the way we predict people's behavior according to gender. And I found actually that if I think of myself in they terms instead of she terms, sometimes I, for example, don't put up with quite as much bullshit as I will, as it just is very interesting to me. But no, you're not offending me.
It probably wouldn't bother me, except for the fact that it still to me is a plural pronoun. And
well,
I wish there was more, but it isn't so much anymore. But I wish there was a distinction between like they and them or something, where one was one and one was the other, and I would know this refers to the group and this refers to a person. And I would make it would make it easier for me as far as the identification of what I'm talking about.
I think it gets easier with use. One of the things actually we've done on my Discord server is I love my moderators for doing this, is they've made sure everybody has all the pronouns that they want, right? So that everybody can find the pronouns that they prefer. And I want it to be a really comfortable place. I want it to be a place where people feel like they can be themselves. And I feel like pronouns are part of that.
No, I remember distinctly being chewed up by a couple writers years ago when I was on a panel, and afterwards they said you kept using the word guys, and I was using it as a generic version for male and female, and everyone else in the audience knew that, but they really, and this was like 20 odd years ago, they really took it personally. I thought about it.
Yeah, I have a friend who always objected to that in a way that I always think of her with, and I'm bad about using guys, and guys is gendered. You could say folks, you could say peoples. There's lots of words for it.
I would probably have said gals instead. That would have been worse, So it was kind of whatever I said to these women, it made everything worse. So our conversation didn't go well.
Citizens.
Oh, sure, that sounds really.
Comrades.
It sounds like I'm taking numbers from my poll of which people we would enslave next or something.
That's it. Bring out the laser tags. Yeah.
Well, I hadn't thought we'd go into that. Laser tags. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anybody else no one's got a question? I tell these people are just bugging me tonight. They just won't ask any questions. Anything else you want to talk about? We're going to be out of time in a couple minutes.
No, I think thanks to people for being here. This is a very cool day, and so thanks for being part of that. I really appreciate it, my fellow citizens. Yes.
It just sounds like it sounds like one of those speeches where you're going to go, now is the time for us all to step forward and die in service of our government, or something.
Well, I will say one thing. This book was more fun than any other book has been to write. The second book has been the same way, and I hope that people enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it, because it was just a huge joy. I love these characters, and it's a lot of fun.
There's Skidoo. Skidoo is quite a character. I was taken aback by the one scene she's in. They are in the middle of the book to maybe go, what? Okay. But I don't think, except for John Sculls, I can think of it right now, who was writing space opera that mixes the dramatic and the humor. And I always felt that it's sad that he sort of had to, what's the word for it? Not over push the humor part on people, but it's such an important part of the books, and there needs to be more of it out there. I think that it's fun to have drama, but especially in the age of grimdark, there's enough of that out there. I don't need anybody else to start spawning new universes where, I got up and introduced an author a while back and said, their usual stuff, they're all going to die. And she's like, no, it's not going to be like that.
No. Well, I mean, it's okay to have fiction that's for fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're probably going to wrap it up then. It's 7 o'clock.
Totally
And
cool.
I thank you folks in the audience for coming along, and hope you enjoyed the ride. And Kat, happy birthday
you.
and book birthday. And
Thank you.
hopefully see you in a few days to sign your books, and we'll see you at Comic-Con.
Awesome.
Everyone have a
Take
good
care.
night.
Bye-bye.